been to the Greene, Adair, or Casey County, you've been right in my stomping ground. My name is Colonel William Henry Casey, born in 1754 in Frederick County, Virginia. I came to Kentucky in the winter of 1779-1780 after going on an expedition with George Rogers Clark, and then I married Jane Montgomery in 1782. Speaking of that adventure, that was one of my favorites, for it was with George Rogers Clark to sack 3 key Indian villages, Kaskaskia, Cahokia, and Vincennes. I was a soldier under him. On our way to the villages, we went for some ways on flatboats down the mighty Ohio. There were around 20 families that had come with us to settle that stopped at Corn Island, named for the first corn crop. Afterward, they moved inland. Clark and I and some of the other soldiers built a fort on the banks. That fort turned into a city, and the city was Louisville. Anyway, back to my original story. Our attack was successful, and I went to Kentucky at Fort Logan. I helped establish Logan Station with my brother-in-law, Benjamin Logan. We're related because I married Jane and he married her sister, Anne. After he and I had built that station, I decided to make a bold endeavor. With 30 other men, I resolved to build a station. We crossed the Green River at Plum Point, and I selected a suitable location for a station, the hanging fork of the Dix River. We named it Casey Station, which I am proud to say was for me. A couple years later, in '93, I bought some land and began to farm. And my farm was the first farm south of the Russell Creek. That area later became known as Adair County, named after my comrade in arms, General John Adair. I am a man focused on education and want the children of Kentucky to be taught well. One of my heroes is Mrs. William Coombs. She started the first school in Kentucky at Fort Herod in 1776. She taught the children of Harrodsburg without books, pencils, or paper, except for Bibles and hymnals. Mrs. Coombs worked hard to give the future generation of Kentucky a good education, and I am very appreciative for what she did. To say that I'm a politician would be an overstatement. However, I was elected to the State House of Representatives in 1795. It was during this time that the horrid Alien and Sedition Acts were passed, and the Kentucky Resolutions was written. I served as a state senator starting in 1800. Previously, I fought as a colonel in the Revolutionary War with General John Adair. When Kentucky became a state in 1792, I became Lieutenant Colonel of the 16th Regiment of the Greene County Militia. That was a great day. People came from all over the state to see Mr. Shelby be inaugurated. Anyway, back to my original story. I was one of the first judges of the Quarter Session Court, along with 2 very honorable men, William Buckner and Elias Barbie. I also attended the Second Constitutional Convention in 1799. It was here that a few minor moderations were made to the Constitution to give the government less power. I died on December 1st, 1816. I was buried in the Johnston Cemetery. I made many totally reasonable appeals about my burial before I died. A tree was to be planted atop my grave instead of a tombstone. I had my grave bordered with bricks from my brand new house looking over the Green River. Most important of all, I was buried in my rocking chair that I had lived in for many years. My great-grandson is Samuel Clemens, and those of you who know your authors know that his pen name is Mark Twain. Anyway, that's my life and death, and I hope you all enjoyed it.
Hello fellow Kentuckians, my name is Jenny Wiley. When your life has been marked by hardship like mine, sharing the company with kind folks like you is a true pleasure. You may recognize my name from a state park here in our state. I still can't believe it. Today, I'll be sharing with you about why they gave me that honor and what helped me get through the hardest months of my life. I was born in 1760. It was an exciting time to grow up on a frontier. I remember hearing tales of Daniel Boone's bravery and the settlement he and his men set up, Fort Boonesboro. It was one of the first English-speaking settlements on this side of the Appalachians. It seemed like as soon as the fort was established, war began. Fort Boonesborough served as a major frontier outpost during the Revolutionary War. Even though I was only 16, I remember when we got the news that the Declaration of Independence had been signed by some of our great leaders. I'm sure you've heard of some of them. John Adams, Ben Franklin, and surely you know Thomas Jefferson. Oh good, I'm glad to see their legacies live on. In that same year, 1776, several young women from Fort Boonesborough, including the Calloway sisters and Mr. Boone's daughter, Jemima, were abducted by Indians. Mr. Boone, Samuel Henderson, and some other brave men quickly tracked them down. Thank God. Samuel and one of the Calloway sisters, Betsy, eventually took a liking into each other and got married at the fort shortly after. 2 years later, I had my own wedding to Mr. Thomas Wiley. Thomas built us a cabin where we could raise our own family, and I was so pleased to be starting a new household near my family on this beautiful land. We lived in relative peace for the next 10 years. Thomas worked hard to provide for any needs we had. I gave birth to 4 beautiful children and was pregnant with a 5th when an unimaginable series of events happened. It was a quiet day at the cabin, and Thomas had gone to the trading post, and I was making clothes for my kids. Suddenly, my front door flew open as if a storm wind was surging through the hills. And my brother-in-law, John, burst through the door. "Jenny," he said with urgency in his voice, "there are Indians here nearby. You need to get out of here now. Gather up your children and go to my house." I looked past John toward the empty, peaceful fields and told him I would get the kids ready, but I thought that we could wait until Thomas came home to leave. If there are Indians, surely they wouldn't attack until dark. John persisted, though, so with the help of my younger brother, Bat, I began to finish up the day's chores and get the kids ready to go. I was both reluctant to go and nervous at the fact of coming face to face with hostile Indians. As I was putting away my sewing tools, I began to hear unfamiliar voices and the sound of pounding footsteps across the dirt path. Bat and I barricaded the door with as much as we could, but the Indians forced their way in. Bat and my 3 oldest kids were killed almost immediately. Clutching Tommy, my baby, I begged them to keep the 2 of us alive, and for some reason, they did. I was taken captive and forced to trek through the terrain with Tommy on my hip. Even though I was drained and crushed with grief, I knew I had to keep going for Tommy and my unborn child. After several weeks of making our way through the forest, I could tell that Tommy was beginning to grow ill. I could not move as fast as the Indians wanted, and trying to keep a watchful eye on Tommy's condition made it even more hard. Then, one morning, I woke up to find that Tommy, my last living child, had died. Exhausted and weak, I went into premature labor and birthed a child who only lived days before being murdered by the Indians. I wept continuously for my babies, all 5 of them. I had no earthly strength left to give, and I could only cry in anguish to God, asking him to sustain me. As the weeks and months went on, God helped me to endure like only he could. I proved my value to the Indians by weaving baskets and teaching several of them to do so. They forced me to skin and cook the food they caught, which was hard work. I kept my head down though, and asked God to give me the strength I needed and a way of escape, and glory to God, he did. One afternoon, while all the Indians were out looking for food, I went to a river and saw a group of settlers there across the water. I called out to them for help, knowing that the river was too high to cross alone. They sent me a small crooked raft, and with my heart pounding out of my chest, I climbed and pushed off the bank. When I was about halfway across the water, the Indians came crying out in anger. They'd found me and wanted me to pay for my attempt to escape. I made myself as small as possible as a barrage of arrows shot across the water. Well, with the Lord's protection, I made it across and was soon reunited with my husband Thomas. We went on to have 5 more children, and I was blessed to live another 40 years. They say it took strength and heart to continue on the way I did, and that's true. But I never could have done it without my God, and I pray that you let him do the same for you.
If you have had any kind of abdominal operation, you can thank me, Jane Todd Crawford. Not to sound proud, but I am the first person to ever have an abdominal surgery. Before I get to that incredible story, I should tell you about my background. I was born and raised in Rockbridge County, Virginia. I was almost a Christmas baby, for December 23rd, 1763 is my birthday, and I grew up in a large family. My dad, Samuel Todd, was a tough man because he was in the law enforcement in Beaufort County, Virginia. My mom, Jane Todd, was also tough, for she had many children: Lydia, Polly, Alice, Sarah, Hannah, John, Samuel, and me. Speaking of tough people, in 1776, when I was 13 years old, the two Calloway sisters and Jemima Boone had been floating on the Kentucky River and were wildly attacked by 5 Indians. They tried to protect themselves, but failed and were captured. The maidens left clues as they were journeying and trekked many grueling miles with the Indians. Fortunately, Floyd Boone and a group of men saved them after traveling for a couple days, and the women were uninjured. But think of how scared they must have been. Anyway, back to my original life story. January 9th, 1794 was one of the best days of my life, for I became Thomas Crawford's wife. Sam Houston wedded us, and he is not to be confused with his famous nephew of the same title in Texas. I had 5 children, but one of the tragedies of my life is that one of my daughters passed away while still young. My other children are James, Samuel, Thomas, and Alice. Thomas, our kids, and I, along with another family named the Mitchells, traveled the difficult road to Kentucky from Virginia in a month, which I think is pretty impressive considering the challenging terrain. By November 5th, 1805, we had made our home in Motley's Glen in Greene County. On this farm, we grew tobacco and wheat, which flourish in the fantastic Kentucky soil. Being a new state is an exciting time, but it can also be trying. During a period of money trouble in Kentucky, a public quarrel happened. The people of Lexington broke the pavement to throw at those of the opposite political party. When everyone was acting rationally, 2 wise men halted the fight. Although they had different views, R.J. Breckinridge and Charlton Hunt strolled together as if they were friends. They showed that you can calmly disagree, and thankfully, the quarrelers stopped their wild behavior. I hope my life exhibits the same traits as these good men. In 1809, even though I was in my 40s, I thought that I was bearing twins. Now, this is the year that my second cousin, Mary Todd Lincoln's husband, was born, which makes me sound old. His name was, I can't remember. Oh, Abe. It was Abe. Yep, anyway. Where was I going with that? Oh, yeah. The time for birth came and went, and Dr. Ephraim McDowell inspected me at my house. He realized that I had a fatal growth on my ovary. I knew that I would die if an operation was not done. So I traveled 60 miles on a horse through the difficult hills of the Bluegrass to get to Danville, which is where my operation happened. My procedure was on December 25th, 1809, 2 days after my birthday and Christmas Day. It was in the McDowell house and lasted 25 minutes. Also, anesthesia was not around yet. It was pretty painful, but it could have been worse. Of course, the pain was intense, but the fear of the future was challenging as well, for no one had ever had an operation on their abdomen before my surgery. Dr. McDowell made a cut on me that was 12 inches. Then he took a 22.5 pound tumor. I was carrying a whole lot of extra weight around all the time. Then, after this, he positioned me on my left side to empty the fluid, and then he washed my intestines. Finally, he sutured me closed and put adhesive plaster on me as well. I was happy to be on my feet after 5 days and returned back to my house only 25 days after my procedure. My faith was extremely important to me before, during, and after my surgery. I was raised a Presbyterian and uttered psalms and hymns during my procedure. Once my son James became an adult, he decided that he wanted to be a pastor, and I instructed Sunday school students at his church. While I am telling you about my trust in God, I should mention the Great Revival, for it affected many Kentuckians. It actually began with the Methodists, but spread throughout the Commonwealth. People traveled to camp meetings to hear about God. Because of this, at least 6 Baptists started the Friends of Humanity, which attempted to stop the act of owning slaves. Speaking of slavery, my family did own slaves, but we set them free while we were still in Greene County. The time of the Great Revival is a wonderful period of seeking God, and many were saved. I live in a time of great bravery. Dr. McDowell and I are certainly not the only daring people in Kentucky. One heroic story is about 2 adversaries becoming companions because of the deed of a man. John Floyd was injured after aiding some pioneers, and he was running away from the Indians. He and a man named Captain Samuel Wells had been opponents. When Wells was also trying to escape, he noticed that Floyd was hurt, so he leapt off his horse and put Floyd on it. They survived and became comrades after this event. Wells was a courageous man, and I am proud that he was a Kentuckian. In 1810, we changed houses again. We left Greene County, and in 1817, we moved to Madison, Indiana. I am proud to say that my husband was in the Indiana legislature from 1820 to 1821. Unfortunately, he passed away by falling down the stairs. It was kind of ironic because I survived a newfangled surgery and he perished by tumbling down the stairs, but it was very hard. Anyway, after this, I lived with my daughter Alice and her husband, William Paul Brown. Then I dwell with my son James. I am a blessed woman to have the chance to live so much longer than I was going to originally because of Dr. Aoife McDowell's courage to perform my surgery.
Hatito Tecumseh Niho. Hello, my name is Tecumseh Niho Wisi Lapawa. I'm very happy to be here. My name, Tecumseh, means shooting star. I was born into the Panther clan of the Shawnee tribe around 1768. We did not have birth certificates like the Europeans, so we do not know exact birth dates. It was while I was young that the white man was taking our land. My father, Puxwan Way, was killed in the Battle of Point Pleasant, which was the only major battle in Lord Dunmore's war. He was the governor of Virginia. One of your leaders in that battle was a young man named Isaac Shelby. He would one day become the governor of your state. 4 years later, Daniel Boone and a company of men were captured by the warriors of our tribe. They were taken to Chillicothe, which is where I lived while I was young. Boone was adopted by Blackfish and given the name Shoutoi. To our great disappointment, he ran away to warn the people of Boonesboro because he heard that we were going to attack Boonesboro. He succeeded, but our attack did not. I considered the white man my enemy because they killed my father and destroyed Indian towns. There were many Indian tribes who spoke different languages: Shawnee, Mingo, Iroquois, Wyandot, Cherokee, and others. We agreed that land belonged to all tribes and that no single tribe could sell land to the white man. I'm most famous for traveling around convincing different tribes to unite and resist the theft of our land by the white man. During this time, I found a prophet's town with my brother. The wretched whites were not only taking our land, but killing innocent Indians. I became respected as a brave warrior and used my fame to travel across the land and unite Indian people from different villages. While I was south recruiting Choctaws and Muskie Indians, William Henry Harrison brought a force of 1,000 men and camped near my home in Prophetstown. The prophet led an attack, but was defeated. When I returned to Prophetstown, I found it burned down, with the bodies of other Indians laying around. All of these battles happened as your nation moved towards your second war with England. Kentuckians were especially excited during this time, and Major James Denny marched 120 volunteers in sight of my camp. I led an ambush on Major Denny and dealt the first wounds to the Americans in the War of 1812. But now we come to the end of my story. I was allied with the British General Henry Proctor. Americans attacked us in 1813 near the Thames River. William Henry Harrison attacked us, and at my death, the others became disorganized and fled. Perhaps your first governor killed my father. Another Kentuckian claims to have killed me. His name was Richard Johnson. He wrote his claim to become senator, and then a vice president under Martin Van Buren. Even after my father was murdered, I tried to negotiate peace with your new nation. I did not want war, but it was my job to defend my people and their land. After my death, one of your newspapers wrote this: "Every schoolboy in the Union now knows that Tecumseh was a great man. His greatness was his own, unassisted by science or education." As a statesman, warrior, and patriot, we shall never look on his like again. I hold no malice toward you. I only ask that you take wisdom from the life I lived. Seleno Canola. Again, we will see each other.
Hello, I'm Robert E. Lee. You probably know me best as a commander of the Confederate Army in the Civil War, but I'm not the only one in my family to have served in the Army. My father, Henry Lee III, was a cavalry officer in the Revolutionary War, where he earned his nickname Light Horse Harry. My father fought in the Revolutionary War from 1775 to 1783, and later became the 9th Governor of Virginia from 1791 to 1794. I was born in 1807, and in 1829, I was a top graduate of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. I served in the U.S. military for 32 years, and in 1831, I married my beautiful wife, Miss Mary Anna Custis Lee, and we had 7 wonderful children together. When war broke out in '61, I was offered a senior command in the Union Army. While I deeply respected President Lincoln and opposed secession, I felt a deep duty to my home and loved ones. So when Virginia left the Union, I followed with her and resigned my position in the Union Army. In May of 1864, our forces made and occupied Bowling Green, Kentucky, the headquarters for the Confederate Army. To obtain Bowling Green, we had to fight in battle against the Unionists who also wanted this tactical district. Bowling Green had a notable fresh water source, an entire railroad system, and a perfect gun position for defense. Sadly, this excellent location only lasted so long in our hands. The Federals came and attacked us to such a degree we had to withdraw. In 1865, after fighting for 5 long years, I finally surrendered to my opponent, Ulysses S. Grant, at the Appomattox Courthouse. After the war, I peacefully lived with my wife until I died in October 12, 1870.
Greetings. My name is Verena Howell Davis. I am the wife of the first and the only President of the Confederate States of America, Jefferson Davis. I was born May 7, 1826. Growing up, my mother had a family friend tutor me for school. Now I'll tell you about my husband, Jefferson Davis. He was born June 3, 1808, 18 years before I was born. He was the last of 10 children born to Jane and Samuel Davis. His full name is Jefferson Phineas Davis. Phineas means final. His parents were hoping that he would be their last child. When he wasn't at school, he was working on his family farms in Kentucky and Mississippi. When he was 7 years old, he was sent to the Dominican School for Boys. After that, his father decided to send him to Transylvania University when he was 13 years old. In 1824, President James Monroe appointed Jeff to the cadetship at the United States Military Academy at West Point. He graduated in 1828, 23rd out of 33 in his class. He was assigned to the post of the second lieutenant of the 1st Infantry. The only battle he ever fought in was in the Black Hawk War. In 1835, he married Sarah Knox Taylor. Sadly, 3 months later, Sarah died of malaria fever. He mourned for 7 years until he met me. At first, my mother was opposed to us getting married because Jeff was a Democrat and we were Whigs. But I gave up on that, and we were married in 1845. We had 6 children: Samuel Emery, William Howell, Jefferson Jr., Joseph Evan, Margaret Howell, and Verena Ann. But sadly, only Margaret lived to be an adult. In 1861, he was chosen to be the President of the Confederate States of America. During that time, he had the important job of appointing another general in the Civil War. He appointed Robert E. Lee to be the commander. In 1865, he was captured by General George H. Wilson's cavalry. I tried to be there most of the time, by his side most of the time, but it wasn't very easy. He was kept in the prison in which he was kept was in very bad condition. But to my relief, the North complained enough that they moved him to a better place. Finally, in December 1867, he was released. Jeff and I retired after Jeff made a few trips to Europe. Sadly, in 1889, Jeff died after a good life in service for his country, fighting for states' rights.
Good morning. My name is James B. McCurry. That name might seem familiar to you because the last county formed in Kentucky is named after me. Sit back and listen while I tell you about my life serving the great Commonwealth of Kentucky. I was actually born near here in Richmond, Kentucky. I earned a bachelor's degree at Centre College and then left the state to study law in Tennessee. After I graduated, not to brag, but I was the valedictorian of my class, I returned home to Richmond and began law practice there. It wasn't long, though, before the Civil War broke out. I served on the Confederate side under John Hunt Morgan. One of our most notable raids, known as Morgan's Raid, went the farthest north any raid went in the Civil War. We were captured on that raid and sent to the Ohio Penitentiary. Luckily, John Hunt Morgan and several other men were able to escape. I was sent home about a year later. It was a sad day when we heard that Lee had surrendered to Grant at Potomac's courthouse. I knew then that there was no chance for the Confederacy. Imagine our surprise when we heard that General Abraham Lincoln, president, had been assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. Booth and his accomplices had been trying to help us Confederates out by killing the president and others. It was too late for us, though. After the war, I returned home to Richmond and married my wife, Catherine Hughes. Those years after the war saw many great changes in our state. After Congress passed several amendments to the Constitution, black people were set free, and by 1870, they'd gotten the right to vote. It was just during that time that I decided to run for public office. In 1869, I was elected to serve on the Kentucky State House of Representatives. Then, in 1875, I was elected governor. Being only 37 years old, I was the youngest governor ever elected at that time. The governor's mansion back then wasn't much of a mansion at all, really. It was more of a rundown house. Actually, you all can see it if you go over to Frankfort. It's on High Street. Here it is now used as the home of the lieutenant governor. After my term as governor, After my term as governor, I ran for United States Senate and won. That gave me a chance to support Kentucky's interests at a national level. It might surprise you to learn that I was elected governor a second time in 1911. I was in my 70s at the time, but I still had plenty of energy. I worked to improve Kentucky's child labor and education laws. I made Kentucky's child labor laws the best of any state, and I made education mandatory. And I worked to make the school day lengthened and make textbooks uniform. If you ever get to tour the new governor's mansion, you'll get to see one of my great contributions to Kentucky. I thought it was really important for Kentucky to have a governor's mansion that they could be proud of. I wanted it to be very classy and elegant. I worked hard to get the money allocated for its construction. Oh, if you do go on that tour, be sure to see the double staircase. I helped design that. After my second term as governor, I decided it was time to retire from politics, but I did continue in my law practice in Richmond until I died in 1918. I'm buried there in Richmond. You all are welcome to come by and visit if you like. I hope that my life will inspire some of you people to also serve your state.
Good morning, fellow Kentuckians. My name is Mary Carson Breckinridge, and I'm here to tell you all a bit about myself. I was born in Memphis, Tennessee in 1881. You all may have heard of my grandfather, John Cable Breckinridge. He was the vice president of President James Buchanan. Unfortunately, he died in 1821, long before I was born. But what I would give to have met him. Anyways, fun fact, Kentucky had 4 different governors in less than 3 months. Not so fun fact, in 1900 I heard of a man, William Gobel, who was elected as governor of Kentucky. The day before he was sworn into office, however, he was assassinated. And as far as I know, he's the only governor to ever be shot while in office. 4 years after William Gobel was assassinated, I married Henry Morrison. Great days those were. You could say Henry and I were a match made in heaven. Unfortunately, he died 2 years later. Our beautiful marriage was ruined because of that dreaded disease, appendicitis. After Henry's death, I chose to attend St. Luke's Hospital Training School in 1910. In 1912, I married Richard Ryan Thompson. In 1914, I had a dear son whom I called Brecky. In 1916, I had a daughter, Polly. Little did I know that the most tragic few years of my life were just beginning. Polly died only hours after birth, and Brecky died soon after of an illness. From 1914 to 1918, people tell of a horrid war that took place, World War I. But a war that impacted me much more was going on in my home during those years. Richard and I had begun a never-ending quarrel. More and more, he was becoming unfaithful to our marriage, and by 1920, my happy life with him was ruined. And we divorced. After my first husband and 2 children passed, I vowed to never again let someone die without doing everything I could to help. That led me to start the first frontier nursing service in Kentucky, which originally was called the Kentucky Committee for Mothers and Daughters. I started by hiring 6 nursing midwives, and we traveled around by horseback for the first few years. We aided in childbirth, curing sickness, healing injuries, and treating as many families as we could. Now, what else can I tell you all? Well, one day, we were traveling to a house far out in the country. Surrounding it were rhododendron and buttercups, which are flowers that were toxic to horses. We were forced to travel by foot. But when we were about halfway there, we heard a honking sound behind us. We turned around and we saw a car. Not a carriage pulled by horses, but a car powered by an engine. The man driving it kindly offered us a ride. He told us that the vehicle was called a dewbow, and it was one of the first cars ever made in Kentucky. Not long after that, I was traveling by horseback to another home, and something spooked my horse. He reared, kicked, bucked, and started running. I knew that my safest bet was to jump off him, so I took my chances. I broke my back in that fall, and it caused me to wear a brace for the rest of my life. However, that brace did not stop me from continuing the leadership of my nursing service, to which I was fully dedicated. Eventually, my nursing service became known to enough people that we decided to build a hospital in 1925. I was surprised by the vast amount of people whom I met and aided every day. I used to keep a notebook containing the names of all the families that I helped out, and when it was filled, I counted over 620 families recorded in it. And that was only during the first 3 years of my nursing service. I'm now in my 80s, and I'm still in charge of that hospital. Now, people say that I was the beginning of an incredible legacy, that my dedication saved thousands of lives. But I just wanted to decrease the death rate of Kentucky's people. I wanted to save the lives of others since I wasn't able to save the lives of my own family. I will just say that it was an honor serving Kentucky, and it was an honor speaking here today.
Hello there, my name is Sophia Kendrick Alcorn. I was born on August 3rd in 1883. During my birth, my mother sadly did not make it, which that then led my father and aunt to raise me. Growing up as the youngest of 7 was extremely difficult and challenging for me. I was very close with all 6 of my siblings, but I had a special relationship with my older sister, Annie. She was like the mother I never had, and I'm so grateful that I had her in my life. Even though my mother wasn't around to raise me, I often thought that she was watching me, and I even communicated with her. As a child, it brought me great joy to know that she was there with me in a sense. My family was very successful. Annie got married to James N. Saunders, and he worked in my father's law office. My only brother, Kendrick, graduated from the University of Virginia, and he got a law degree there. And he even worked with my father as well. My brother also was a very well-known circuit judge from the 1930s through 1950s. For a while, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I knew I wanted to make a big difference in the world, and I knew I wanted to help people. With a lot of prayer and thought, I decided to attend Ward Seminary. There, I got a degree in helping blind deaf people. I wanted to teach blind deaf people to communicate because I wanted to brighten their life. After I went to Ward Seminary, I decided to go to Danville to practice at the Kentucky School of the Deaf. While I was there, I became a principal there, and I even helped teachers and students there. While I was there, I even perfected my Tecumseh method. My Tecumseh method, I spent years on. It was a method that I made for blind and deaf people to communicate. It even helped them with schooling. I helped them in that, and what I did is I used pipe cleaners, vibrations, and even shapes. The Tecumseh method was named after my first two students, Tad Chapman and Oma Simpson. Oma was an 8-year-old girl who came to me because she had been blind ever since she was born due to meningitis. I taught Oma for 10 years, and while she was there, she learned mathematics, geography, and she could even knit and weave and touch type. Oma was the first deaf person in the world to be educated orally. My next student, After they decided to move back to South Dakota, I decided to go with them. While I was there, I met a boy named Tad Chapman who was 11 years old. Tad had been blind ever since he was born, and I wanted to help him. I taught him at the South Dakota school for 4 years, and while I was there, I even taught the other teachers too. When I decided to retire, I decided to move back to Stanford, Kentucky, which was my hometown. While I was there, I decided to go back to my home church, which was the Stanford Presbyterian Church. I was the first women elder there, and I even joined the women's club there. The critical and vital need came from trained teachers who could teach deaf and blind people, so I started working with the American Foundation for the Blind. I worked with the American Foundation for the Blind for like 3 years until I died. I died on November 28th in 1977. After my death, my Tecumseh method was used for years to come. I helped thousands of people with my method, and even Ann Sullivan used my method to help Helen Keller.
Morning. My name is Vernon May Sloan, and I was born on October 9th, 1914 in Knott County, Kentucky. Most of my life I spent in a small home in Pippa Passes with my family. In my later years, I wrote 6 books, including Common Folk and How We Talked, to get rid of the stereotypical myths surrounding the Appalachian people like myself and how we lived. May not have known this, but I was a girl when the Spanish flu was making its way across Kentucky. Many of the people up here either got sick or died, but thanks to Mary Breckinridge's rural healthcare system, we were able to see doctors and get medicine for the sick and the bedridden. This reminds me of our governor of 2 terms, Albert B. Chandler. This good man helped create the rural electricity and road systems. The things he did made our lives here very happy and much easier with the electricity and better roads. We're all very thankful for this great man and wish that there will be more people in the world like him. While growing up, my siblings and I would often ride into town with a guide to take a look at God's fine creation. There was an occasional person walking by, and the beautiful buildings were old, but hold on. Occasional personal advice. When we got back, we would take care of the cow and wash it for dinner. I would normally have to get a bath because I was so dirty even the pigs wouldn't want me. We didn't have a lot of toys while growing up, not board games or man-made games, but my siblings and I would often create our own games to play while either being outside or doing chores. One of these games, we would, while shucking the corn, there were different colors of ears of corn. Each color represented a different amount of points, blue being 100 points, red being 50 points, and so on. When we were done, we would tally up all the points and decide a winner. When I was in my later years, I would spend my free time making quilts and cloth dolls. I made around 1,800 quilts, and some of these can be found hanging up in Hickman School in Pippa Passes. Our lives were not perfect. We weren't rich, and we did not have many luxuries, but I was very thankful for the life that God gave me and my family in Knott County of the Appalachians of Kentucky.